Coming up on Meet the Leaders, what's wrong with the LIPA restructuring? And as Race to the Top takes place, will New York State schools withdraw from Common Core? Meet the Leaders starts right now. Hi, I'm Pat Halpin, and welcome to Meet the Leaders, the show getting you to the heart of local government right here and right now from the 5th Assembly District, Assemblyman Al Graf. Assemblyman, it's great to have you back on Meet the Leaders.
Pat, good to see you again.
Good to see you, too. We've got a lot of things to talk about that are hot issues here in New York. But before we do, what communities are part of the 5th AD?
Well, since restructuring, I lost the entire South Shore. So they moved me north of Vets Highway. So I have Holbrook, I have Ronkonkoma, Holtzville, Center Reach, Selden, parts of Farmingville, parts of Patchogue, and a little bit of Islandia also.
So you're basically right,
Lake Grove.
And Lake Grove. So you're kind of in the heart of Suffolk County, at least the 5 western towns. A little bit of Islip and a lot of town of Brookhaven right there.
Right, and you know, great people in the district and hardworking people, and they have a lot of concerns.
Yes, they are, and one of their biggest concerns has to do with all of the education reform that's been aggressively pushed in New York State and throughout the nation. You know, the governors from all across the nation had said we got to do more to improve the quality of education so that kids have the skills necessary for the jobs for the 21st century, and they've wrap that all under this thing called Common Core, and I want to get your thoughts about that.
Well, Common Core, it's like the apple's rotten at the core.
Why?
Well,
why do you say that?
Take a look at some of the ELEs. Take a look at what they're actually doing. I have a degree in elementary education, and the problem with Common Core is you're taking the teaching out of teaching. And when I used to go into a classroom, they actually had me in kindergarten.
You taught elementary school kids?
Yes, yes, I did. Upstate New York, and I had my student teaching, they actually put me in kindergarten. I kind of laughed and said, do I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger?
I was going to say that, kindergarten cop.
Right. But if you look at some of the things.
So did the kids like you?
Yeah, I hope so. You know, but I was able to teach. I was able to engage. Understand, when you teach kids, what you do is you teach to the middle of the class.
Right.
After you teach to the middle of the class, you'll give seat work. And what the seat work does is reinforce the concept that you just taught. Now, some kids are a little more advanced. They might need a little harder stuff to do just to keep them engaged.
Right.
But what happens is now that gives you an opportunity to get to the children that didn't grasp the concept. Understand, there are children develop cognitively what they're able to do, and everybody learns differently.
You know, it's so interesting that you should say that because I've been following a lot of this debate on Common Core, and a lot of educators throughout the world have held up Finland's education system as an example where students, when they graduate to go into college, I mean, really are at a much higher level than students are anywhere in the world, including the United States. And you know what they say? They say kids should not be doing the kinds of rigorous work, testing and all that stuff until they're at least 7 or 8 years old, for the very reason you're saying. They said it shouldn't be a high stakes, high test, anything at the early stages of education.
But if you look at it, what I'm trying to say is, look, it gives me an opportunity to get to those kids. Look, people learn differently. Some people learn visually.
Right.
Okay, I have to look at something, see it. Other people, it's auditory. So if they listen to tapes and they keep listening to tapes, that's how they get it. Other people are textual. You have to write it down in order for it to sink in. We all learn in different ways. Common Core is taking that away.
How is it taking it away?
Because what's happening is, right now, the state is actually giving lesson plans. Teach 5 minutes of this, teach 10 minutes of this, teach 15 minutes of this. You don't have time to go to these kids. You're going to lose these kids, okay? And let's look at the curriculum. Let's look at what they're doing. First grade. One of the things they ask them is point out ancient Mesopotamia on a map or a globe and discuss how ancient Mesopotamia affects modern day civilization today.
That's in first grade?
First grade, 6-year-olds. I don't know who wrote this, They were never in the classroom.
How do they pronounce just to pronounce Mesopotamia is
Right.
a mouthful.
Oh, and then they go through Machu Picchu. They go through I mean, it's incredible
But
what
you
they're
and
asking.
I both know that kids are curious.
They may be curious, but you know what?
And that in theory, look, I get what they're trying to get kids to understand, but you got to lay the foundation for that.
But you know what? In the early stages of school, we're trying to get them to learn how to write left to right. You know, it's foundational things.
Yes,
It's development. Where are their brains wired? What are they able to do? You know, I understand trying to raise the bar a little bit, okay? But this isn't going to work.
So let's talk about the philosophy of Common Core for a second. And stepping back for a moment, I don't think you don't disagree that children today need a higher level of skills than perhaps what you and I were required to have to be competitive, to get a good job, to support yourself, to even read a technical journal or manual requires a higher level of reading capability than what it used to back in the day.
Well, Pat, let's look at this. You know, reading a technical manual.
Right.
If there's a technical manual on something you're not interested in, okay, really you have no interest in it, you're not going to read it. But if it's something that you are interested in, you're going to eat that up. You're going to chew through it. You're going to read other ads. Look, the bottom line is once the government gotten into education, they screwed it all up.
But the government's always been involved in education,
you know what?
haven't they?
But they've got involved a little too much. And the bottom line here is, look, when the Commission of Education came up, and normally, you know about the budget hearings. The budget hearings are usually nice, warm and fuzzy. You're doing a good job. What do you need? What's going on? Yeah, well, I don't do warm and fuzzy, okay? I'm an ex-cop, and the bottom
You were warm and fuzzy when you were in kindergarten.
That's it, but not in the legislature. But now what happened is when he came up there, he handed me graphs, okay, showing graduation rates. And he's sitting there smiling. And I'm looking at it, I go, what are you smiling about? He goes, what do you mean? I go, you're telling me these are your graduation rates. You're proud of these, okay? I'm looking at them as dropout rates. This is deplorable, okay? I'm ashamed of this. And what I said to him is, according to what you just handed me, moderate needs and low needs schools, the graduation rate is 73%, which means that 3 out of 10 students are dropping out.
That's right.
The high needs schools, it's 62%.
Right, which means nearly
4
40%.
out of 10 students are dropping out.
That's right.
And what's happening is we require every single kid to get a Regents diploma, right? And some kids can't reach that level.
Okay.
They're getting frustrated. Well, let me just finish.
No, finish your point because I want.
They're getting frustrated. They're dropping out.
That's true.
Okay.
All right, we're going to take a short break. I want to continue this conversation when we come back because I want to talk about the petition drive that you have to address the very issues that you've raised. So we'll have more with Al Graf right after this break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to MTL, here with New York State Assemblyman Al Graf from the 5th Assembly District. Assemblyman, you were making some really good points about the problems with Common Core, the nature of the testing that's going on, even at the earliest grades, and the fact that all of us learn differently, and we have, as learners, developed differently based on, our strengths and our weaknesses and our approach to learning. And development changes. You may be able to run a 100-yard dash faster than I can, but that doesn't mean that you and I can't finish the race.
Right.
So you have a plan, and you call your plan the fixnewyorkschools.com. You can go to that, and you have a petition for people who want us, who you're encouraging to change the focus of education in New York State. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, education in New York State, as we were talking about before, is, look, a lot of kids, when we're talking about Regents diplomas, having to get the Regents diplomas, what I'm trying to say is let's take a look at giving kids an option. Give them an option of a Regents as well as a general diploma.
Why do you want to do that now? Because hold on, let me just interject. Because back in the day, and it wasn't that long ago, before we got into everybody having to pass these standardized state tests, districts could give out a general diploma. They called it a local diploma. And there were a lot of kids graduating from schools who, frankly, did not have the basic skills they needed to be able to read and write and do arithmetic.
Well, you know what? I'll give an example. I know kids that can't sit in a classroom.
Yeah.
All right. However, they're great with their hands. Right. They'll argue that you need the upper level math.
Right.
Listen, if I'm a carpenter, I have to read a tape measure. I'm going to have the math that's specific to my job. That interests me.
You need algebra. You need
Right.
geometry.
But
it's got to be related.
me.
You're saying it's got to be related
my
to
field.
what you're interested
Right.
in. Yeah.
And the other thing is, look, when you and I went to school,
Right.
okay, we had wood shops, we had electrical shops, we had automotive shops. My sister-in-law graduated with her LPN. She's been working ever since. We've decimated our BOCES programs. So part of the things that I'm talking about is not only to give them the option of the regents and the general, because we have too many kids dropping out, and
Right.
kids can't reach that goal. And we're going to create an entire underclass of unemployable people, right? Because we're not giving them any skills. Also give them a choice of a career track as well as an education track. What I propose is to take the BOCES funding out of the school budgets and fund it separately so we can have a vibrant BOCES program.
You know, one of the things that's bothered me, and you're putting your finger on it, is that it's really up to the local school district if they're going to allow their kids to go to these programs at BOCES. And as you mentioned, a lot of the BOCES are struggling today, but they've got excellent programs around, technology, being technical people in the medical field, all of these applied areas where you're actually learning real skills, and you can literally get a good paying job the day you graduate from high school.
Well, you know what? There's nothing wrong with being an electrician. There's nothing wrong with being a plumber. Have you paid one lately? I can tell you, kids coming out of law school, plumbers are making more.
Yes, they are.
Electricians are making more.
Yep.
And as much as they say, well, we want everybody to be nuclear physicists, that's not a reality.
But you do need to have certain skills. And one of my concerns, I think this is what I've heard the regents talk about, is that that in the past, without such a rigorous standards and testing to go along with it, kids were just being pushed through.
Really? So carpentry and stuff like that, just surprised that.
No, I'm not talking about carpentry, but kids are being pushed through, and frankly, they weren't holding kids back who didn't learn the skills that they needed to be promoted.
I don't think that you can do that today. Education is a focal point of all the parents. And getting back to the Common Core thing, just to let you know, this is a mommy movement. Okay? All I am is I'm the catalyst. This is all over the state. I'm getting calls from all over the state. My petition just yesterday, because now what's happening is you're having parent-teacher conferences, okay? Yesterday alone, 700 people signed a petition, over 700 people. There are over close to 8,000 signatures that went to the governor's office. This whole idea was to start a conversation. These parents are sitting there and saying, I have a first grader who is crying that doesn't want to go to school, a second grader. I have a kid that's been an AP student his whole career, and after this test, which 70% of the kids failed, they're telling him that he needs services.
But one of the problems with that test was that students were not taught the material that was going to be on the test.
Well, that's great. Well, they're sitting there.
So how do they expect these kids to do well? Even kids who typically do very, very well. They've got to at least understand the material and know what's going to be on these exams.
Well, that's the problem here.
And the teachers weren't properly trained.
Right. And
as
you
you
know
rolled
what?
this thing out.
New York State lately, nobody wants to have a conversation.
Right.
They rush through. A bill comes in the Senate, it's passed in 5 minutes. Right? A bill comes in the Assembly, not as much. We sit there, we debate it. We debate bills ad nauseum, right? But they still pass it along. So it's like, the bottom line is they don't want to have a conversation.
So if people feel the way you do and say enough is enough, we've got to get back to the essential things that are important, that young people can think, that they can read, that can write, that they have a skill that can support them going forward, or the skills they need to be successful in college and post-college, they should go to your website, right?
Go to my website.
What is your website?
It's fixnyschools.com. And read it. And if you agree with me, petition the governor, call your senator, call your assemblyman. There's a bill right now, 7994, right? And what it does is withdraw New York State from Common Core and raise to the top.
But wouldn't that send a terrible message that we can't compete in this world economy? I mean, that's what I hear the state
That's a joke.
commissioner
That's a
saying.
joke. Who are we competing with? Okay? China, you're comparing apples to rocks. So China only takes their kids that are on a scholastic track, they only count them. A lot of these other, and I hear, well, we're competing with the European nations. Really? Which one? What are we competing with?
Well, in Germany, they have a very defined vocational education program.
Right. Germany makes cars. They make all kinds of things.
And you become a machinist, a mechanic, a technician.
Right.
You're at the top of your field.
And let me ask you something. Where are we competing with them? What are we competing with them for? I mean, we're doing a lot more than Germany is. Germany is the size of a state. Okay. So the bottom line. Who else? Finland.
Hasn't the nature of work changed? I mean, for example, back when we were growing up, if your father worked at Grumman, had a high school degree, he could support his family and send their kids to college and lead a middle-class life. Those jobs are gone.
Oh yeah, electricians are really hurting.
Okay.
Okay, take a look at they've got the nicest house on the block. They're the ones driving the Mercedes.
They do.
Okay.
So you're saying there are still those jobs that are available.
Right, and somebody's
but
got to turn the lights
But
on.
we've got to do a better job of training our young people for those positions.
We got to give them the opportunity to train for those positions. There's nothing wrong with it.
All right, fair enough. Go to his website, www.fixnyschools.com. Okay, we're going to take a short break. When I come back, I want to ask you your thoughts about the restructuring of LIPA. Was that a good idea? So stay with us. Meet the Leaders. We'll be back in 90 seconds.